Hello and welcome back to the Alnwick Castle podcast. I'm Deborah Beecroft.
And I'm Daniel Watkins.
And on today's episode, we're returning to the subject of a previous podcast.
Back in November last year, you might have listened to our episode about Thomas Percy, the Constable of Alnwick Castle, who was also involved in the Gunpowder Plot. If you haven't heard that one yet, please do go back and check it out in our podcast archive.
Today's episode is also about Thomas, but with a musical twist, as he's the subject of a new show called Treason the Musical.
Deborah spoke with two of the team behind Treason, Allan and Kieran Lynn, to find out all about the show, their love of the Wizard Earl of Northumberland, and their historical and theatrical influences.
And here is our conversation, so please enjoy. I am very happy to be joined on this episode of the Alnwick Castle podcast by the composer, lyricist and co-writer of Treason the Musical, Allan, and co-writer of the show, Kieran Lynn. Hello, nice to meet you both.
Hello, lovely to meet you.
Hi.
How are you both? Are you all right?
Very well, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to be on the Alnwick Castle podcast about the musical Treason.
Absolute pleasure to be chatting to you today.
I have been listening to it for a while. So when you first released the songs on streaming services?
Yes, which was...
Like 2 years ago?
Yes, 2 years ago, exactly. Yeah.
I've pretty much been listening to it since then, to be honest. So when Daniel was doing the podcast, I did ask if he could invite you both onto it.
Amazing.
Partly because I just wanted to meet you both, and partly because the subject matter is very relevant to Alnwick Castle.
Mm.
Of course.
So what I'll start with asking really is why a musical about the Gunpowder Plot?
I guess the kind of premise came from the fact that it is steeped in such kind of theatrical flair already as a story, and it just seems so suited to be on the big stage and shown as an epic story with music. Yeah, I just think it has a natural theatrical flair, and that's kind of what gave as the first spark, as it were, to start creating something. Everything that you think about when you think about the Gunpowder Plot, it's steeped in something quite mysterious and theatrical, and there's so much to it, and we think it's a truly British story that was fully deserving of having a full-scale epic musical based around it.
And obviously the focus is less on the more famous Guy Fawkes, who, as far as I'm aware, doesn't actually appear in the show. So was that a conscious decision to take him out of it and put in the other plotters who are a little less well known?
It very much was, and I feel that obviously Guy Fawkes is the person that everybody will first think of when they think of the Gunpowder Plot. But the more research that we did, the more we realised that really he was on the periphery, really, when it came to being the mastermind of the plot and also the planning of the plot. So we started to research the other people that were involved, which is how we came to look at centering our story around the Percy family, and Thomas and Martha Percy specifically. We felt that Thomas really had a clear motivation for getting involved in the plot, and so we started to look at him as a character, and everything kind of evolved and fell into place from there.
And Kieran, is that the same for you?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think probably the stakes are a little bit higher, I think, for Thomas Percy than they are for Guy Fawkes. Anyone who doesn't know, Fawkes was just sort of hired to be a mercenary. So he wasn't necessarily maybe as emotionally involved as some of the other plotters. And I think we felt like if we went right back to the emotional core of the story, then we would sort of have a more higher stakes tale to tell. And I think that has proved to be true as we've gone through the development of the show.
So you mentioned that you did quite a bit of research. So where did you look? Was it books or historical documents or things like that?
My very first port of call was literature on the subject, and so I went through quite a few history books that were centered around the plot. I also delved into some TV series that were based on it, some that were better than others, I have to say. And but really gathering as much information from as many different sources as possible.
Yeah, I would say, considering this is an event that is celebrated or at least marked every year in British culture, it's oddly underrepresented in fiction. There's lots of history, as Ricky says, lots of documentaries, there's lots of great non-fiction content, but actually it hasn't been explored hugely either on stage or on screen, which I think is a good thing for us. But it is a little bit curious. So that naturally meant that Ricky and I spent more time in the history section than in the fiction section, as it were.
Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Like you say, there's not a huge amount culturally about it. So, which is what, partly as well, when the musical came up online, it was something that I was quite interested in listening to because it is something a bit new and a bit different. But obviously, these days, there's quite a lot of musicals and stage shows like Hamilton, like Six, that have come up that are a bit more modern touches to old stories. How much were the influences whilst you were writing the story and the musical itself?
I think just the fact that it is a musical based on history, we were really happy to embrace what musicals like Hamilton and Six have done.
Mm-hmm.
And for me as a composer, I've always been in love with epic film scores, but also deep-rooted folk English sound worlds as well. So I felt like this story could use those influences. Also bringing in the energy that musicals like Hamilton and Six bring, because the great thing about them, as well as them kind of bringing a modern twist onto things, is that they just are engaging because of the energy that they bring, and that was something that we were really wanting to bring to our production.
Yeah, and I would say that even though Hamilton and Six have both had global successes, and so it feels like they're sort of part of a new trend, but actually history has always been really rich territory for theatre and for film and for musical theatre, and a lot of the really great sort of canonical musicals are based on historical events, so it's not necessarily a new trend, although it does appear to be so because there had just happened to have been a couple of real successes. But I think it's probably part of a larger movement about culture, about this culture analysing its history. Mm-hmm. And American culture analysing its history. And I think there's a very new way of looking at history that Hamilton and Six tap into very, very well, and that we think that this show will do too.
Whilst you were writing the show, obviously, like you said, is a historical event. Was it difficult to work out what to put into it and what to leave out? Or was there anything that you thought might not necessarily be factually correct, but would make part of a good story or anything like that?
There are certain instances that we need to be aware of, that in terms of the history, we want to be as true to the history as possible, but sometimes it doesn't help in terms of engaging an audience as best it might. And so I guess creative license has come with mainly the black spots in the history that haven't been really divulged or written down. So for instance, the character of Martha Percy, there's not a lot that's written about her compared to her kind of male counterparts, which isn't surprising for women in history. So we were actually able to use license with her character to bring out what she would represent for women of the time, but also how she may have been involved in the story. And as I say, that does give us creative license. So I think it's finding that balance of being respectful and true to the history as much as we can, but also keeping it engaging for our audience.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely, and I would also say that actually, one of the great things about this story, but one of the things that makes it challenging to harness, is its scale. It's a huge story that takes place all across the country with dozens and dozens and dozens of really key characters, and so one of the processes that I think we've been going throughout is a sort of distillation process, because if we tried to tell every single subplot that was involved in the Gunpowder Plot, the show would have been days long. So naturally we have to keep pushing stuff to the side and focusing on just the core story that we want to tell, and that distillation process has been a big challenge, but we think we're starting to get there.
And speaking of characters within the show, obviously at Alnwick Castle, one of our favourite figures is the Earl of Northumberland at the time, and it's somebody who we're actually starting to research a little bit more into. Can you tell us any of your favourite parts of what you found out about the Earl of Northumberland at the time?
The favourite thing that I have is purely the fact that he had the nickname the Wizard Earl, and that kind of is quite evocative in itself. It shows that he obviously had some character, and I know that he had quite an interest in maps and that kind of thing, and possibly even astrology. So I love the idea of him being quite eccentric, and even these little tidbits that we've picked up are really fascinating from a theatrical point of view.
Yeah, he does feel like a really classic English eccentric. I think one of the things that's interested me the most is it's quite easy to look at history in terms of black and white, as in there are good people and bad people, and it can be quite simplistic at times. One of the things that I really like about the Earl is anyone who knows the story of the Gunpowder Plot will know that the plot itself was perpetrated by Catholics as a result of being heavily persecuted, essentially by the state. The Earl, who was Catholic, or who was at least a Catholic sympathiser, actually did quite well during the reign of Elizabeth and King James. And I think there's something about that feels very, very complicated in a way that I quite like. I think it moves away from this being a sort of simple event with, two distinctly drawn sides. And it offers a little bit more complexity to the story, and in a way that I think is really interesting.
Yeah, that's right. So that he, like you say, did quite well from Elizabeth and then James, but after the plot, he ended up being the one who was put in the Tower of London. So he did have
His luck did run out
a little bit. I mean, he wasn't too bad. The rest of the plotters didn't survive, but
Although I hear, is it true that his prison was sort of your minimum security prison, and he's able to, still use his wealth, and he has books, and he still has visitors, and
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So he was in the Tower of London for over 15 years, but within that, he was allowed to bring his own servants into the grounds, his horse, his sons were educated there. He had a library built where he'd sort of make conversations with other prisoners, like for Sir Francis Bacon at the time. There was a bowling alley, a tennis court. So not too bad a life for somebody who was in prison.
Yeah, it certainly beats being hung, drawn, and quartered.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then even after he left, he paid a ransom, but he was never allowed to come up to Alnwick Castle again, just in case. But other than that, yeah, it wasn't too bad compared to, like you say, the other plotters and how Guy Fawkes ended his life, as it were. Which is why he is one of our sort of most interesting characters up here, because he had all of that happening. And like you say, he was the Wizard Earl. He did a lot of scientific and experiments with alchemy and things like that. So yeah, that's why we always quite enjoy when he's a character in a novel or a film or a musical. Speaking of the musical, Martha Percy, actually, of the songs that I have heard, has one of my favourites, which is Blind Faith, which I absolutely love because I love how she's singing to Thomas and then Thomas is singing to somebody else, but it matches really well. Which is your favourite of the songs in the musical that I might not have heard?
Oh gosh, I mean, for me as the composer, that does change pretty much on a daily basis. There is a song that we have released onto our website most recently that was part of our Drury Lane concert version of the production, and it's called No Happy Ending, and it's a real fight song between Thomas and Martha. They're definitely singing at each other at this point, and it's almost the kind of beginning of the end of their relationship. They're estranged by this point. Thomas has divulged what he's been doing over the however many months previous, and how he's been involved with this plot with Robert Catesby. And it's so far removed from her ideologies that they basically just have this huge argument, and it's a real kind of gutsy toing and froing from these two characters, and it really does signal the beginning of the end for them.
I would say that my favourite song in the show is a song called The Inevitable. One of the big thematic explorations of the show is just what makes an ordinary person turn into an extremist, which is what the Gunpowder Plotters became. And The Inevitable is a song which I think Martha is really grappling with that, and whether her husband's role in the plot could ever have been avoided, or whether because of the world that they were born into and who they were born as, whether it was always inevitable. And I think there's a version of that a live version with Carrie Hope Fletcher, which is also on our YouTube channel or somewhere on YouTube. And it's also a brilliant version of the song. So I would say The Inevitable is my favourite.
I do like that one because she's asking, isn't she, why men of faith are going so far to the extreme and creating all of this turmoil and danger and things like that. Yeah, that's a really nice song as well, actually. I've sort of, like I say, I've gone back and forward between the original stream songs and then the ones that have been released since then. Was it easy to decide which ones to release to start with and then go into the original stream and then the Drury Lane production, or was it just something that's kind of gone through as more songs have been written or as you've progressed with the musical itself?
That's exactly how we've developed the musical, probably in a very strange way compared to how you normally would. It started with a concept album, essentially, of 5 songs. And then we moved to a streamed concert version, which was an hour long, that had an additional 6 or 7 songs. And then we really started to piece together the narrative, which has had its challenges writing it that way round. But and now we're in a position where we probably have too many songs, and some of them may fall by the wayside, unfortunately. Hopefully not Blind Faith, though. Yeah, but it's been a really, really interesting process for myself and Kieran in producing this. So we look forward to seeing what the future holds for it.
Do you know what the future holds? Have you got anything hopefully in the pipeline with it?
Well, we're always working away, and our producers are always behind the scenes working away. So nothing that I can divulge yet, but I promise quite a big year for the show.
Brilliant. So where can people go to find out more who are interested in either the songs themselves or news as you release it about the musical?
I would recommend going to www.treasonthemusical.com. If you sign up to our mailing list from there, you'll be the first to know when exciting developments happen. We also are on social channels, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at Treason Musical. And all of our tracks that we've released so far are available on Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you would normally stream your music.
And before I let you go, this is just something that I'm quite interested about. What are your favourite shows?
Personally, I'm a huge fan at the moment of Hades Town. I think it's got a real energy and kind of exciting rawness to the music and the kind of folksy bluesiness of it. And I love the story and the mythology behind it. So that's one of my firm favourites at the moment.
Yeah, I tend to like everything, but I think you could do a lot worse than, I mean, Hamilton obviously is a sensation. I think Six is absolutely superb. And there are a lot of new British musicals coming through at the moment that I think are really good. So hopefully we'll see more new British shows over the next few years.
Definitely. And I think it's something maybe that they might follow in your footsteps a little bit and develop it in a couple of years, but to get a bit more interest as it goes on, because I think that's really working. Like I say, I've been listening to it for about 2 years and I made Daniel listen to it as well. I think it's a nice way of being able to listen to a show and feel like a part of it as it grows up as well.
Yeah, that's always been our aim. As soon as we decided to develop it in front of our audience and so that they can see in real time how a show gets developed. I was just going to ask what your feelings are towards Thomas and Martha Percy from your perspective. I'm really interested to know what you think of them as historical characters.
Well, I mean, like you say, Martha, we don't know a huge amount about, as is the case with most historical figures. You hear about the men's point of view and because they are in all the documents. But Thomas, yeah, he is an interesting character. And obviously, he was not just a cousin of the Earl of Northumberland who lived here, but he actually worked at Alnwick Castle as well. He was the constable of the area, so he ran the castle on a daily basis. He collected taxes. But knowing about him, we also know that he wasn't very well liked and was maybe a bit of a brash figure. He was personally possibly a bit of a selfish man as well. But again, a lot of ours is based on his cousin, which is why it's quite interesting listening to the music to hear something from Martha that we don't really speak about. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Thomas.
Yeah, that's a very diplomatic way of describing it, I think.
Yes, yeah. To be honest, I haven't really thought too much about Thomas Percy. Like I say, mostly I sort of because the Wizard Earl's one of my favourite characters that we do talk about. So I always base it from him and what the events around him rather than actually what happened to his cousin and how he was the one who was really involved in it the most. I think that is it, if that's all right, unless there's any more questions about Alnwick Castle from your point of view.
Nothing for me, although I have visited and I liked it very much.
Good. Is that before you wrote the musical or after?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I had started, I should say that it wasn't connected to, it wasn't a research trip. But it might have been just very, very close to when I became involved in the project. So I probably should have seen it as an omen. But Ricky and I definitely overdue a research trip up there, I think.
Absolutely. And what I find sometimes with Alnwick Castle, because of where it is, obviously it's very north, and you can almost see why Thomas and the Wizard Earl were able to almost do their own thing because it's so far away from where court was, but also why they had that connection with the Scottish court, because again, it's much, much closer to them rather than London itself.
Yeah, and I think one of the themes of the show is about how King James tries to sort of unify the kingdoms, and obviously talking about England and Scotland there, but it must have been hard enough to unify just England. I mean, if you think about the distance between Northumberland and London, I mean, even now it feels like quite a way, but back then it must have been, weeks, a week's travel or something like that. And just administratively, how you would have managed that as a single kingdom is quite remarkable, really.
Yeah, and I think that's why after the Wizard Earl was released from the tower, he was never allowed up north again because it was very isolated. So they weren't sure what was happening up here. Whereas at least in sort of the southern estates, they were much easier to keep an eye on the Percys after that as well. But like I say, I was very excited to talk to you both because I'm a big fan of the songs and of the show. And I'm hoping that at some point I'll get to see it properly in person.
We hope so too.
Well, keep an eye out because hopefully you will get the opportunity before too long.
Lovely. So thank you very much, Ricky, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Kieran, as well.
Thank you.
So, Deborah, how was it talking to Ricky and Kieran?
Really good, yeah. It was really nice to listen to somebody explain how the show developed. They clearly knew a lot about the history of the Percys, or at least in that period, so it was nice to be able to speak to people who had a bit of historical knowledge already and how they used that to create what's going to be a spectacular show, I'm sure.
We could tell from listening to that you're already a big fan, but if you listen to that and you want to find out more about Treason the Musical, we do recommend following them on social media for their latest updates on the show. On the 27th of January, they'll be releasing the recording from their Drury Lane concert.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Alnwick Castle podcast, please give us a review or a rating, wherever you get your podcasts. Share it with your musical and non-musical friends, and let us know what you think by emailing podcast@alnwickcastle.com.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with a look at another part of Alnwick Castle's history.
Until then, I've been Deborah.
And I've been Daniel.
Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.